jumped on this band as soon as Godfather came out. I could not find my cassette tape. I went into the basement and I was able to find this. When this album came out, so much was happening in music. There was this huge transition happening. We had already experienced one Lollapalooza, so Lollapalooza had come and gone. Everything was mixed up. I had gone from listening to 90% metal and 10% 80s music to listening to all kinds of stuff, a variety of things. 1991 really changed a lot for me. In the fall of 91, a lot of new things were happening for me with music and everything else. And, it was definitely like a coming of age time for me. And I started finding out about a lot of bands. I had just turned 18 at the time, and all this stuff was happening with music. There just wasn't enough time to see all these bands. So unfortunately, I'm just gonna get to it and let you know that while I am a fan of Ned's Atomic Dustbin, I never got to see them live. I ended up this is my favorite of their albums. I really love Are You Normal? This is a good album as well. But anyway, this one, when I got this record, I didn't realize what was happening sonically in there. I would listen to it and I'd be like, wow. And back in those days, I had this thing about not, unless it was metal stuff, I typically didn't sit down and try to learn everything. Actually, I have to confess, I did learn the Danzig record front to back. The first Danzig album, I used to come home from school every day, get out my guitar and just riff to that thing from start to finish. I did this every day, along with Kill 'Em All. Those are two albums that really stuck with me. Actually, there was another album that also stuck with me a lot. It was Four of a Kind from DRI. But anyway, those albums, I really listened to them a lot and played a lot of guitar to them. But when I started playing bass and I made the transition to bass, I just didn't want to, I was afraid of sounding like other people, and I felt like I was onto something new and different, of course, until I discovered Primus. But anyway, yeah, all that stuff was happening in 91. I became a Primus fan. I would get to see them a few months after discovering them and actually opening up for Rush because I couldn't get into this small club called the Masquerade. I saw so many bands there. But unfortunately, I missed out on seeing Nirvana there. I missed out on seeing Sepultura there. I missed out on seeing Ned's Atomic Dustbin there. I missed out on seeing Voivod. I'd have to say that Ned's Atomic Dustbin is one of those bands that I have to add to that list of bands that I should have seen. These are bands that I introduced the rest of my friends to. I came back with Beneath the Remains from Sepultura and told my friends that they had other albums, Schizophrenia and Morbid Visions. I brought things to them. They brought things to me, like my brother, Chris, who I've mentioned on this channel before. He got me into Voivod. And, unfortunately, I didn't get to see him. He has seen way more shows than I have, and I've seen a lot of shows. But anyway, let's talk about this band. If you couldn't tell when I was playing that opening intro there to this video, I was using a capo on the second fret because that's the way that bass player played. It took a while before I realized, hey, there are two bass players in this band. I opened up the CD, and when you open it up, it tells you that one guy plays one bass and another guy plays another. They have some silly thing that they say in there. This is what it looks like in the cassette as well. Here it is. This is what it says right here, okay? It says, Dan, the fast drumming man. Alex plays one bass, Matt plays the other. Oh, I'm sorry, it says Matt the other. Rat does the guitar, and John sings. So that is what they say in there, and I was kind of like, that's interesting. But I would be listening to this music and I would be like, wow, that sounds really different. So I decided when I started listening to these guys again, I was gonna look into what they were doing a little bit and also figure out where does this stuff come from? Because if there's one thing, I can hear influences in other people's music. I can hear a song and I can almost swear that I know where they got it from. And it's kind of creepy because as I've gone on throughout my musical journey and my love for music and listening to it, I've noticed this more and more, and I've even noticed it with people that I've played with. I've discovered things later and been like, wow, really? And I'll contact former musicians or bandmates of mine and say, dude, did you get that from this song? And they'll just start laughing. And I'm like, you prick. I just always tried never to copy something else that other people do. But if you go back and you look and you do your homework, you will see that so many bands have like a template, or they look at another song and they say, I was influenced by this song, so that's where I got this from. Some are not as obvious as others. Well, these guys, you're hearing them play, and there are a lot of influences that come to mind. A lot of people would say they sound like hoodoo gurus, but their bass, like having the basses, more than one bass playing at the same time in the band, you would hear some of that stuff being done in recordings. Even Duran Duran, as early as Rio, John Taylor, he said when he tracked My Own Way, he couldn't make that transition from finger playing that, and so he overdubbed the picks, like when he would pop the bass, he overdubbed it. You hear some of those dual bass tracks on Angel Dust by Faith No More. There's, Billy Gold does some really cool dual bass line stuff. But having two bassists in the band, I'm not here to give you the history on that. I'm just here to tell you where I discovered it. And I discovered it with The Cure. A song in particular is Primary, which is on Faith. That track, and they openly have Robert Smith, and I don't know if it's Simon Gallup that's playing on that album. I'm forgetting, but either way, two bassists are going simultaneously on that song, and it sounds awesome. Then there's, Wartime, Henry Rollins, like that project with Andrew Weiss. There are other bands, and please remind me, because there was so much going on in 1991 when I discovered these guys. There were so many other bands that I just can't think of them all right now, but I feel like a lot of that started with The Cure, because Robert Smith, the way he wrote and the way he did things, he just did some really cool stuff. I'm telling you that the song Primary, that's one of my favorite songs, period. But yeah, their music was like part of the soundtrack of my life in the early 90s. I mean, I loved this band. I thought they were very unique, and I thought they had a very unique sound. So let's talk about their weapons. They had the two bass players and they had a guitarist, and I believe the guitar player played a hollow. He played a semi-hollow. I think it was a Guild. Don't hold me to that. It is one of those semi-hollow guitars that are really popular. It might have been a Gibson E335 or something. I don't know. But anyway, he played a hollow body, and then their bass weapons, and they were always like this. There was a bass player who would play all the low-end type, your typical bass lines, and he played a Stingray. And the other bass player played a Rickenbacker, and he would always play up high. You could rarely see him dropping below the 12th fret. He always stayed above the 12th fret, except for in Fracture there, he slips down, but that's just him by himself. So he typically would do the more melodic and chord-like stuff, or the chords on the bass, which I really identified with, and I gravitated towards him because of that. So those were their weapons. They seemed to stick with it, even when I saw a video of them playing back in 2021, and they still had the same formula. Dudes playing a semi-hollow on the guitar, and the other guys are playing the Stingray and the Rickenbacker. Everybody in the band's great. Not to take away from the other people. I love their songs, and I like their messages in the songs and the lyrics. I just thought they were an awesome band. Coming out of the early 90s, there was just music coming at you from every direction. There were so many great bands to listen to and so many shows to attend. It was such a great time. But this band, I really enjoy going back and listening to their music. I think it's aged really well. I really get super nostalgic when I listen to any of the music from the 90s, even some of the stuff that I hated. I actually like to hear it now. It brings back good memories of my youth. So if you guys have any stories, or you have anything you want to share about Ned's Atomic Dustbin, or if you know anything about any other bands that were using more than one bassist before 1981 or whatever, please let me know in the comments. I look forward to talking to you guys. All right, thanks for watching this video. I'll have another one out to you soon.